The first wave of human suicide attackers struck the Vexthani fleet like angry hornets attacking a giant. Each human carried crude but effective explosives, mining charges repurposed for war, fusion cells rigged to overload, even simple chemical bombs that wouldn't have impressed a Vexthani child. Against the massive alien warships, the explosions were pinpricks. Tiny flashes of light that barely scratched the advanced armor plating, but there were hundreds of them. Minimal damage to outer hull sections, reported the tactical officer. Their weapons are too primitive to cause significant harm. Captain Zethara watched the tactical display with growing fascination. The humans had to know their attack was ineffective, yet they kept coming. Wave after wave of volunteers hurling themselves at her fleet with nothing but personal weapons and desperate courage. "Commander," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the human attackers. What are they saying?" "They're documenting everything, recording messages for their families, sending tactical data back to their fleet about our ship designs and defensive capabilities." Zethara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "They're gathering intelligence." "More than that," her science officer added, reviewing the data. "Each wave is attacking slightly differently. They're learning from the previous group's failures and adjusting their approach." On the main screen, another group of humans approached a Vexthani cruiser. Instead of attacking the heavily armored sections, they targeted the sensor arrays and communication dishes. The explosions were still tiny, but now they were hitting specific vulnerable points. "They're mapping our weak spots," Zethara realized. "This isn't a suicide attack, it's a reconnaissance mission." Her second-in-command looked puzzled. "But Commander, they're still dying." "Each human who attacks us is lost." "Yes, but look at what they're accomplishing." Zethara pulled up the tactical analysis. In the past hour, they've identified 17 critical system vulnerabilities, documented our shield frequency patterns, and transmitted detailed scans of our hull composition back to their main fleet. All of which is useless information, the tactical officer pointed out. Their weapons still can't penetrate our defenses. Zethara was beginning to suspect otherwise. She had conquered dozens of species, but none had ever approached warfare with this kind of methodical sacrifice. Most civilizations valued individual life too highly to throw it away so casually. But these humans seemed to view their lives as tools. Valuable tools, but tools nonetheless to be used when necessary. "Commander," the sensor operator called urgently, "the main human fleet is moving. They're spreading out in attack formation." The 30 human ships had begun a complex maneuver, breaking into smaller groups and approaching from multiple vectors. Their movements were more coordinated now, informed by the intelligence gathered by their sacrificial scouts. "Still only 30 ships," the tactical officer reminded her, "against our 200. But Zethara noticed something her officers had missed. "Look at their weapon signatures. They've modified their armaments again." The human ships now bristled with different weapons than they'd carried an hour earlier. Somehow, in the middle of a space battle, they had reconfigured their entire arsenal. "Impossible," breathed the science officer. "No species can redesign weapon systems during active combat." "Apparently humans can," Zethara replied grimly. The modified human weapons opened fire, and immediately it became clear what they had accomplished. Instead of broad-spectrum attacks that scattered harmlessly against Vexthani shields, they were firing precisely tuned energy bursts, designed to exploit the frequency gaps their scouts had identified. The first Vexthani ship to take damage was a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. Its shields fluctuated and failed as human weapons found the exact resonance frequency to disrupt them. "How did they know that frequency?" the tactical officer demanded. "They learned it," Zethara said quietly, "from the volunteers who died gathering that information. But the humans weren't finished. As their weapons breached the destroyer's shields, they immediately shifted tactics again. Instead of trying to destroy the ship, they were targeting its engine systems with surgical precision. "They're not trying to kill the crew," the science officer reported in amazement. "They're attempting to disable the vessel." The crippled destroyer began listing as its engines failed. But instead of delivering a killing blow, the human ships moved on to the next target. "This makes no tactical sense," Zethara's second-in-command protested. "Why disable when they could destroy?" Zethara was beginning to understand. "Because they're not fighting to win this battle. They're fighting to learn how to win the war." Every disabled Vexthani ship meant more intelligence, more opportunities to study alien technology. more chances to understand their enemy's capabilities and limitations. But the most shocking moment came when the crippled destroyer suddenly erupted in a massive explosion, not from human weapons, but from its own overloading systems. What happened? Zethara demanded. Self-destruct, her tactical officer reported. The crew activated their emergency destruction sequence rather than risk capture. For the first time since the battle began, Zethara felt genuine concern. Her own crews were so afraid of being taken alive by humans that they preferred death to capture. What did that say about humanity's reputation? Commander, communications called out. We're receiving a transmission from the human admiral. Admiral Harrison appeared on the screen again, but this time he was broadcasting from one of the closer human ships. His uniform was scorched, and there was blood on his face, but his expression remained absolutely determined. Captain Zethara of the Vexthani Empire, he said, somehow knowing her name. We've been monitoring your communications. We know you're confused by our tactics. Let me explain something about human nature. The transmission continued as human ships continued their methodical assault on the Vexthani fleet. Every species you've conquered before probably fought the way you expected them to fight, logically, efficiently, trying to minimize losses while maximizing tactical advantage. But you're not fighting a typical species now. Another Vexthani ship lost its shields and began retreating as human weapons systematically disabled its systems. Humans don't fight wars the way other species do. We don't just fight with our weapons or our technology. We fight with our ideas, our determination, and our willingness to sacrifice everything for what we believe in. You think you're facing 30 ships and a few hundred volunteers, but you're wrong. You're facing the entire human race. Every man, woman, and child who believes that freedom is worth dying for. The transmission ended, and Zethara stared at the tactical display. In 2 hours of combat, her fleet had lost 12 ships, not destroyed but disabled and forced to withdraw. The humans had lost hundreds of volunteers and taken significant damage to their own vessels. By any logical measure, the Vexthani were winning. So why did Zethara feel like she was losing? Captain Zethara of the Vexthani Empire stood on the bridge of her dreadnought, watching the small blue planet rotate peacefully below. Her scaled fingers drummed against the command console as she reviewed the intelligence reports. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, another primitive world to add to the Empire's growing collection of slave colonies. The humans had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, their crude ships barely capable of reaching their own moon consistently. Their weapons were laughably primitive, chemical propellants and nuclear devices that couldn't even scratch the armor of a Vexthani scout ship. The entire species should have surrendered the moment her fleet appeared in their system. But they hadn't. Instead, every human government on the planet had simultaneously declared war on the Vexthani Empire. Not negotiation, not attempts at diplomacy. War. Zethara found it amusing. In her 3 centuries of military service, she had conquered 47 worlds. Most species begged for mercy within hours of first contact. The smart ones offered tribute and resources in exchange for peaceful annexation. The foolish ones resisted briefly before reality crushed their spirits. Humans seemed to be in a category entirely their own. Commander, her tactical officer called out, his voice carrying a note of confusion. The human fleet is approaching our position. Zethara's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among her species. Fleet, show me. The main screen shifted to display the approaching human vessels. Zethara counted perhaps 30 ships of various sizes. Crude metal constructions that looked more like industrial equipment than military vessels. Her own fleet consisted of 200 state-of-the-art warships, each one capable of reducing a continent to molten slag. Their largest vessel appears to be broadcasting a message, the communications officer reported. Put it through. Let's hear what these primitives have to say. The screen flickered, revealing a human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. His face was weathered, marked by scars and lines that spoke of a life spent in conflict. His eyes held something Zethara had never seen in a species facing overwhelming odds: absolute determination. This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. You have violated our sovereign space and threatened our world. You have exactly 1 hour to leave this system or we will destroy you. The bridge fell silent. Zethara stared at the screen, certain she had misheard. Did he just threaten us? Her tactical officer checked his displays twice before responding. It appears so, Commander. The humans are demanding we retreat. 30 ships, Zathara mused. Against 200, their weapons can't even penetrate our shields. Their fastest ships move at perhaps 1/10 our velocity. She leaned back in her command chair, genuinely puzzled. Are they insane? Perhaps it's a bluff, suggested her second-in-command. Some species attempt to appear fierce when they're actually terrified. Admiral Harrison was still speaking. We know we're outgunned. We know our technology is inferior. We know the odds are against us. But here's something you clearly don't understand about humanity. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth dying for. The transmission ended abruptly. Zathara sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. In all her years of conquest, no species had ever spoken to her with such calm defiance. There was no fear in the human's voice, no desperation, just cold, hard resolve. Commander, her science officer spoke up, I've been analyzing their ship configurations. Their designs are unusual. Explain. Their vessels appear to be heavily modified industrial ships, mining equipment, construction platforms, even what looks like a cargo hauler, but they've been fitted with weapon systems that seem improvised. Improvised how? They've somehow managed to mount fusion warheads on mining charges. They've converted construction lasers into weapons. One ship appears to have a magnetic accelerator designed for launching asteroid debris, but they've loaded it with refined uranium projectiles. Zathara's interest was piqued. Crude but potentially effective against unshielded targets. That's what concerns me, Commander. These modifications suggest they've specifically designed these weapons to work around their technological limitations. This isn't random desperation, it's calculated adaptation. Before Zathara could respond, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. The human fleet had suddenly accelerated to attack speed, their ramshackle vessels moving in a formation that looked chaotic, but somehow purposeful. They're not even trying to avoid our targeting systems, the tactical officer reported. They're flying straight at us. Lock weapons on their lead vessel. Fire a warning shot. The dreadnought's main cannon spoke once, sending a beam of concentrated energy past the human flagship. The shot could have vaporized the entire vessel if aimed directly at it. The human fleet didn't even slow down. They're not responding to the warning, communications reported. Wait. I'm receiving multiple transmissions from their ships. Put them through. The bridge speakers crackled to life with overlapping voices, different accents, different languages, but all saying variations of the same thing. For Earth. Remember Luna Colony? They want to fight? Let's give them one. Come on, you alien bastards. Zathara realized with growing alarm that these weren't military communications. These were civilians, miners, construction workers, cargo pilots, people who had volunteered for what they knew was a suicide mission. Commander, her tactical officer called urgently. The humans have just jettisoned something from their ships. Multiple small objects on intercept courses. Missiles? No, they appear to be people in environment suits. The main screen zoomed in on the approaching objects. Hundreds of humans in spacesuits were flying toward the Vexthani fleet, each one carrying what looked like improvised explosive devices. Zathara stood from her command chair, her scaled skin shifting to a darker hue, a sign of deep unease among her species. They're going to ram us with their own bodies. Shall I order all ships to open fire? The tactical officer asked. Zathara hesitated. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. Not tactically wrong, strategically wrong. These humans weren't just fighting a hopeless battle. They were doing something else entirely, something her centuries of military experience hadn't prepared her for. They were making a statement. Hold fire, she commanded. I want to see what they're really planning. The human reinforcement fleet was unlike anything in Zathara's military experience. As they approached, her sensors revealed the true scope of human desperation and ingenuity. Civilian passenger liners bristling with improvised weapons, cargo freighters converted into missile platforms. Even what appeared to be a luxury cruise ship, its elegant hull now studded with fusion warheads. They've militarized their entire civilian infrastructure, her science officer reported with a mixture of awe and horror. Every vessel capable of spaceflight has been pressed into service. Zathara studied the approaching armada. How many ships total? Over 800, Commander. And they're still launching more from the planet's surface. Her tactical officer looked up from his console with disbelief. "Commander, I'm detecting families aboard many of these vessels. The humans have brought their civilians into combat." "What?" Zethara moved to review the sensor data herself. The readings were unmistakable. Life signs indicating not just military personnel, but women, children, and elderly humans aboard the approaching ships. Why would they bring non-combatants into battle? Her second-in-command asked. Before Zethara could speculate, her communications officer interrupted. "Commander, we're receiving hundreds of individual transmissions from the human fleet. They appear to be personal messages." "Personal messages? To whom?" "To us, Commander. The humans are sending personal messages to the Vexthani fleet." Zethara authorized the transmissions to be played randomly across the bridge speakers. What she heard made her question everything she thought she understood about warfare. "This is Marcus Rodriguez aboard the cargo hauler New Horizons. I'm a mining engineer with a wife and 2 kids. I want you to know that I don't hate you for coming here. I just can't let you take away my children's future. Jennifer Walsh here, piloting the modified transport Freedom's Dream. My grandmother survived the London Blitz in World War II. She taught me that sometimes you have to fight, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Captain Liu Wei of the converted liner Peaceful Journey. I have 300 families aboard this ship. We're not here because we want to die. We're here because some things are more important than living." The messages continued for hours. Hundreds of individual humans explaining their reasons for joining what they knew was likely a suicide mission. Not professional soldiers following orders, but ordinary people making extraordinary choices. "They're not warriors," Zethara murmured. "They're civilians who chose to become warriors." Her science officer pulled up detailed scans of the human vessels. "Commander, their ship modifications are remarkable. They've somehow managed to create functional weapon systems using completely inappropriate components." "Show me." "This passenger liner has converted its dining hall into a missile battery. They're using the food service elevators as loading mechanisms. This cargo ship has turned its storage bays into fighter launching platforms. And this one?" He paused, checking his readings twice. "This one appears to have converted a swimming pool into a particle accelerator." "A swimming pool?" "They filled it with superconducting coils and turned it into a massive electromagnetic weapon. The engineering is crude but functionally sound." Zethara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species that reached spaceflight eventually developed professional military forces with standardized equipment and tactics, but humans seemed to approach warfare like they approached everything else, with chaotic creativity and absolute determination. "Commander," her tactical officer called urgently, "the human fleet is moving into attack formation. But their formation is strange." "Strange how?" "They're not grouping by ship type or capability. They appear to be organizing by family units." The tactical display showed clusters of human ships moving together, not based on military logic but on personal relationships. Parents and children, siblings, lifelong friends, all staying close to each other as they approached certain death. They're turning their emotional bonds into tactical units, Zethara realized. They fight together because they care about each other. It was the opposite of Vexithani military doctrine, which emphasized professional discipline and emotional detachment. But watching the human fleet maneuver, Zethara could see the effectiveness of their approach. Each group fought with desperate intensity to protect the others in their unit. The first engagement began when a squadron of converted human cargo ships engaged a Vexthani battlecruiser. By all logical measures, the cargo ships should have been destroyed instantly. Instead, they swarmed the alien vessel like angry insects, each ship targeting a different system with weapons that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. "They're not trying to destroy our ships," the tactical officer reported. "They're trying to capture them intact." "Capture them? How?" "They're using some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable our systems, then boarding with cutting tools to extract our technology." Zethara watched in fascination as human engineers in spacesuits methodically stripped components from disabled Vexthani vessels. They worked with the efficiency of people who had spent their entire lives building and repairing complex machinery. "They're treating our warships like broken equipment to be salvaged," her science officer observed. But the most shocking development came when one of the captured Vexithani vessels suddenly reappeared on the tactical display, now flying in formation with the human fleet. That's impossible, her second-in-command protested. They can't have repaired and reprogrammed one of our ships in less than an hour. They didn't repair it, Zethara said grimly. They rebuilt it. The converted Vexithani ship opened fire on its former allies, but its weapons had been modified with human technology. Instead of the precise, controlled energy beams typical of Vexithani warfare, it fired wild, chaotic bursts of energy that seemed to ignore conventional defensive measures. They're combining our technology with theirs, the science officer reported, creating hybrid systems that operate outside our defensive parameters. Within the next hour, 3 more captured Vexithani vessels had been converted and were fighting alongside the human fleet. Each one was unique, modified according to the specific skills and imagination of whatever human team had claimed it. Commander, communications called out. We're receiving a transmission from Supreme Admiral Korthvex. The Supreme Admiral's holographic image appeared again, but this time his ceremonial composure had cracked. Captain Zethara, explain to me how primitives are stealing our ships and turning them against us. Supreme Admiral, the humans are more resourceful than our intelligence indicated. Resourceful? Korthvex's voice rose to a roar. They're using our own weapons against us. This is impossible. Sir, I recommend we withdraw to regroup and develop new tactics. There will be no withdrawal. Korthvex commanded. I am dispatching Admiral Thekmor with the 3rd Battle Fleet to assist you. Between your forces and his, you will have over 500 ships. Surely even humans cannot overcome those odds. The transmission ended, and Zethara stared at the tactical display. 500 Vexithani warships against what was now over 1,000 human vessels of every conceivable type. But she was beginning to suspect that numbers might not matter as much as she had thought. The humans weren't fighting a conventional battle. They were fighting a war of adaptation and innovation, turning the conflict itself into a massive learning experience. And they were learning much faster than anyone had thought possible. Admiral Thekmor arrived with the 3rd Battle Fleet like an avenging storm. His 300 additional warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the technological superiority of the Vexithani Empire. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, designed to reduce planets to ash and subjugate entire star systems. But as his fleet moved into position alongside Zethara's forces, Thekmor could immediately see that something was terribly wrong. Captain Zethara, his voice crackled through the communication system. What is the meaning of this chaos? The tactical display showed a battle unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships of every conceivable design were engaged in frantic combat with Vexithani forces, but the engagement patterns made no sense. Instead of organized fleet actions, the battle had devolved into thousands of individual conflicts scattered across the solar system. Admiral Thekmor, Zethara responded, the humans do not fight according to conventional military doctrine. I can see that, Thekmor replied acidly. I can also see that they have somehow acquired several of our vessels. 17 ships have been captured and converted, Zethara confirmed. The humans strip our technology and integrate it with their own systems within hours. Thekmor studied the readings with growing alarm. The converted Vexithani ships were fighting alongside human vessels, but their weapon signatures were completely different from standard configurations. Instead of precise energy weapons, they were firing projectiles that appeared to be chunks of asteroid debris accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. They've turned our particle accelerators into kinetic weapons, his science officer reported. Crude but devastatingly effective. Sir, Zethara continued, I must inform you that the humans have also been monitoring our communications. They appear to have learned our language and tactical procedures. As if summoned by her words, Admiral Harrison's face appeared on both ships' communication screens simultaneously. But he looked different now. His uniform was scorched and torn, his face marked by exhaustion and determination. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed clear signs of battle damage. Admiral Thekmor, Harrison said, pronouncing the alien name with surprising accuracy. Welcome to our solar system. I'm sure Captain Zethara has briefed you on our unconventional approach to warfare. Thekmor's mandibles clicked with fury. Human, you will surrender immediately or face annihilation. I have brought 500 of the Empire's finest warships to end this pathetic resistance. Harrison actually smiled. 500 ships. That's impressive. We've been monitoring your fleet movements since you arrived. Your vessels are certainly more advanced than ours. Then you understand the futility of further resistance. Actually, Admiral, I think you misunderstand the situation. You see, we've been fighting your people for almost 2 days now. Do you know what we've learned in that time? Thekmor remained silent, but his tactical officer was frantically analyzing the human communications. We've learned that your ships are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly standardized. Every Vexthani vessel follows the same design principles, uses the same technologies, operates under the same tactical doctrines. Harrison's image gestured to something off-screen. That makes you predictable, and predictable enemies are vulnerable enemies. You are insects compared to the might of the Vexthani Empire. Thekmor roared. Maybe, Harrison acknowledged. But insects have advantages too. We're small, we're fast, and we adapt quickly. Most importantly, we're not afraid to sacrifice ourselves for the survival of the swarm. The human admiral's expression became deadly serious. Admiral Thekmor, I'm going to give you the same offer I gave Captain Zethara. Leave our system now and we'll let you go unharmed. Stay, and we'll teach you why no adversary walks away from a fight with humanity. Thekmor cut the transmission with a savage gesture. All ships attack formation Delta 7. I want every human vessel reduced to atoms. But as the combined Vexthani fleet moved to attack, something extraordinary happened. The human forces suddenly scattered in all directions, their movements seemingly random and chaotic. Where are they going? Thekmor demanded. Unknown, sir, his tactical officer replied. They appear to be retreating? Finally showing sense, Thekmor muttered. But his satisfaction was short-lived. The scattered human ships weren't retreating. They were taking positions throughout the solar system. Some moved toward the asteroid belt, others approached the gas giant planets, and still others positioned themselves near the system's star. What are they doing? Zethara asked over the communication link. Her answer came in the form of massive explosions throughout the solar system. The humans had somehow rigged entire asteroids with nuclear devices, turning them into improvised weapons. Gas giant mining platforms suddenly revealed themselves to be heavily armed orbital fortresses. Even the star itself seemed to be involved. As solar collection satellites began redirecting concentrated stellar energy toward the Vexthani fleet. They've militarized their entire solar system, Thekmor's science officer reported in awe. Every installation, every orbital platform, every mining operation has been converted into a weapons emplacement. The Vexthani fleet found itself surrounded by thousands of improvised weapons platforms, each one firing projectiles and energy beams with chaotic intensity. The attacks weren't particularly accurate or powerful individually, but there were so many of them that the alien shields were overwhelmed by sheer volume. Sir, the tactical officer called urgently, we're taking damage across multiple vessels. The humans are using some kind of coordinated targeting system. Thekmor checked the readings and felt his blood chill. The human attacks weren't random at all. They were systematically targeting specific systems on each Vexthani ship. Life support, navigation, weapons control, communications, everything necessary to keep a warship operational. They're not trying to kill us, he realized with growing horror. They're trying to capture our entire fleet. The battle raged for hours, but it was unlike any military engagement in galactic history. Instead of ship-to-ship combat, it had become a massive salvage operation. Human boarding parties swarmed over disabled Vexthani vessels, stripping them of useful technology and converting them into hybrid weapons platforms. Admiral, Zethara's voice came through the communication system, strained with exhaustion and defeat. My flagship has lost main power. Human boarding parties are cutting through the hull. Thekmor watched helplessly as more and more Vexthani vessels fell silent, their crews either captured or forced to evacuate. The humans worked with the methodical efficiency of industrial salvagers, treating the alien warships like raw materials to be processed. This is impossible, he whispered. We are the Vexthani Empire. We have conquered 47 worlds. We have the most advanced military in the galaxy. His science officer looked up from his console with stark terror in his eyes. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting more human ships approaching from other planets in their system. Other planets? Mars, Europa, Titan, several asteroid colonies. It appears the humans have been preparing for this battle across their entire solar system. They've been building ships and weapons on every world they control. Tekmor stared at the tactical display as hundreds more human vessels appeared on the sensors. Each one was different, built with the resources and materials available on its world of origin. Martian ships with red iron hulls, European vessels designed for underwater combat, asteroid miners converted into kinetic bombardment platforms. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Tekmor realized he might be facing an enemy that simply could not be defeated through conventional means. The humans weren't just fighting a battle. They were fighting a war of evolution, turning each engagement into an opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Zathara received a priority transmission from the Vex Thani High Command. The holographic image of Supreme Admiral Korthvex materialized on her bridge, his ceremonial armor gleaming with the honors of 100 conquered worlds. "Captain Zathara." His voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Your reports make no sense. How can 30 primitive vessels be causing this much difficulty?" Zathara chose her words carefully. Korthvex was known for executing subordinates who brought him disappointing news. "Supreme Admiral, the humans are unconventional in their approach to warfare." "Unconventional?" Korthvex's scaled features darkened. "You have 200 of our finest warships against a handful of crude human vessels. There should be nothing unconventional about this engagement. With respect, Supreme Admiral, I believe we may have underestimated their capabilities." The transmission crackled with Korthvex's fury. "Are you suggesting that these barely evolved primates pose a genuine threat to the Vexthani Empire?" Before Zathara could respond, her tactical officer interrupted urgently. "Commander, we have a problem. Multiple human vessels are approaching at maximum velocity. Destroy them," Korthvex commanded from the transmission. "Supreme Admiral," Zathara said carefully, "I recommend we observe their approach first. The humans have shown unusual tactical creativity." "I don't care about their creativity," Korthvex roared. "Reduce their ships to atoms now." Zathara nodded to her weapons officer, who began targeting the approaching human vessels. But as the Vexthani weapons charged, something extraordinary happened. The human ships suddenly broke apart. "What are they doing?" Korthvex demanded. "The vessels are separating," the tactical officer reported in bewilderment. "Each ship appears to be composed of multiple independent modules." What they had assumed were 30 ships revealed themselves to be over 300 smaller craft. Mining pods, cargo containers, construction modules, and passenger shuttles all connected together to create the illusion of larger vessels. "Clever," Zathara admitted grudgingly. "They made us think we were facing a small fleet when actually they had a much larger force." But the humans weren't finished surprising them. As the separated modules scattered across space, they began attaching themselves to the disabled Vexthani ships that had been forced to retreat earlier. "They're boarding our vessels," the science officer reported. "The humans are using magnetic clamps and cutting tools to breach the hulls." "Impossible," Korthvex snarled. "Our emergency protocols would prevent any boarding action." "Supreme Admiral," Zathara said grimly, "they're not boarding the ships to capture them. They're stripping them for parts." The main screen showed human figures in spacesuits methodically dismantling Vexthani technology. They worked with the efficiency of industrial salvage crews, cutting away armor plating, removing weapon systems, and extracting computer cores. "They're reverse engineering our technology," the science officer continued. "In real time during active combat." Korthvex was speechless for several moments. That's not possible. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. They couldn't possibly understand it." "They don't need to understand it completely," Zathara realized. "They just need to figure out how to use it." As if to prove her point, one of the human modules suddenly fired a weapon that looked distinctly Vexthani in design. The beam struck a Vexthani cruiser's shield generator with pinpoint accuracy, disabling it instantly. "They've weaponized our own technology against us," the tactical officer said in amazement. The battle was evolving into something unprecedented in Vexthani military history. Instead of a conventional engagement between opposing fleets, it had become a bizarre form of technological cannibalism. The humans were literally consuming the alien fleet piece by piece, learning and adapting with each captured component. "Supreme Admiral," Zathara said carefully, "I request permission to withdraw the fleet to a safe distance while we reassess the situation." "Absolutely not." Korthvex's image flickered with rage. "The Vexithani Empire does not retreat from primitives. You will destroy every human vessel immediately. Sir, with respect, the tactical situation has become... I don't want to hear about the tactical situation. Korthovex interrupted. I want to hear about human corpses floating in space. If you cannot handle this simple task, I will find a commander who can. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zathara staring at the tactical display. She had been given direct orders to continue the attack, but every instinct told her that the humans were preparing something much more dangerous than a conventional battle. Commander, her communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission from the humans. It's different this time. Show me. Instead of Admiral Harrison, the screen now showed a young human female in civilian clothes. She was seated in what appeared to be a school classroom, with several small human children visible in the background. Hello? She said with a warm smile. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a teacher at New Beijing Elementary School. I wanted to send this message to the Vexithani fleet. Zathara frowned. Why are they showing us civilians? The human teacher continued speaking. I know you're fighting our fleet right now. I know you think this is just a military conflict. But I wanted you to understand something important about humanity. She gestured to the children behind her. These are my students. They're 7 years old. Yesterday, when we learned that aliens had arrived in our solar system, do you know what they asked me? The teacher paused, her expression becoming serious. They didn't ask if the aliens were going to hurt them. They didn't ask if we were going to lose. They asked if they could help fight. Zathara felt a chill run down her scaled spine. 7-year-old children, the teacher continued, volunteering to fight an interstellar empire. That's what you're dealing with. Not just our military, not just our government, but every single human being who believes that freedom is worth protecting. The transmission shifted to show other civilians, factory workers retrofitting industrial equipment into weapons, scientists developing new technologies in improvised laboratories, elderly humans teaching young people how to fight. You're not just fighting our fleet, the teacher said as the transmission returned to her. You're fighting our entire civilization. Every human who has ever lived, every dream we've ever had, every hope for the future we're trying to protect. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Commander, the tactical officer said quietly, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the human planet. What kind of signatures? It appears they're launching something. Multiple objects very large on intercept courses with our fleet. Zathara checked the readings herself and her blood ran cold. Those aren't weapons. They're ships. Hundreds of them. Impossible, her second-in-command protested. Our intelligence indicated they only had the 30 vessels we've been fighting. Our intelligence was wrong, Zathara said grimly. They've been building more ships. During the battle, the tactical display updated to show the new threat. Hundreds of human vessels were rising from the planet's surface. Some clearly military, others obviously civilian craft pressed into service, and still others that defied easy classification. How long until they reach us? Zathara asked. At their current speed, approximately 4 hours. Zathara stared at the display, finally understanding what the humans had been doing. The initial battle hadn't been an attempt to defeat her fleet. It had been a delaying action. While her ships had been engaged with the first wave of human defenders, the entire planet had been mobilizing for war. They weren't just fighting 30 ships anymore. They were about to face the entire human race. 6 months later, Supreme Admiral Korthovex stood in the docking bay of Harmony Station, watching as the latest group of Vexithani refugees arrived from the outer territories. The massive space station, built jointly by human and Vexithani engineers, had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a symbol of cooperation between species that had once been enemies. Supreme Admiral, Captain Zathara approached, but her demeanor was entirely different from their last meeting. Gone was the rigid military bearing, replaced by something that looked almost like contentment. The integration of the newest refugees is proceeding smoothly. Korthovex nodded, still struggling to comprehend how dramatically everything had changed. When news of the failed Earth invasion had reached the Vexithani homeworld, it had triggered a cascade of events that ultimately led to the collapse of the Empire itself. How many ships have requested asylum this week? He asked. 47 vessels carrying over 30,000 Vexithani civilians and military personnel, Zathara replied. Admiral Harrison estimates we'll need to expand the station's capacity again within the month. The irony was not lost on either of them. The Vexthani Empire, built on the conquest of 47 worlds, was dissolving as entire fleets abandoned their post to seek refuge with the humans they had once tried to enslave. Sir, Zethara continued carefully, there's something else you should know. The humans have received communication from the Galactic Council. Korthvex felt his blood chill. The Galactic Council represented dozens of advanced species, most of whom viewed the Vexthani Empire as a useful buffer against unknown threats from unexplored space. If they decided that humanity posed a greater threat than the Empire provided protection, what was their message? They want to meet, Zethara said with what might have been amusement. Apparently, word has spread about what happened here. Several council species are curious about human diplomatic methods. Admiral Harrison appeared in the docking bay, accompanied by Dr. Wells and a group of human children from the station's education program. The children had become unofficial ambassadors, their natural curiosity and lack of prejudice making them ideal for first contact with nervous Vexithani refugees. Supreme Admiral, Harrison greeted him warmly. I trust the latest arrivals are settling in well. Admiral Harrison, Korthvex replied, still struggling with the human custom of informal address. Your people continue to exceed expectations in their generosity toward former enemies. Harrison shrugged. Former enemies is the key phrase there. Once someone stops shooting at us, they're just people who need help. One of the human children, a boy of perhaps 10 years old, tugged on Harrison's sleeve. Admiral, can I show the new Vexthani kids the zero-gravity playground? Of course, Tommy. Just remember to explain the safety protocols first. Korthvex watched as the human child ran off to greet a group of young Vexithani, with the same enthusiasm he might show for any playmates. 6 months ago, the idea of human and Vexthani children playing together would have been unthinkable. Admiral, Korthvex said quietly, I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Of course. Why? Korthvex gestured to the bustling station around them. Your species defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. You could have demanded tribute, established your own empire, conquered our worlds as we tried to conquer yours. Instead, you offer refuge to our people and assistance to our worlds. I don't understand. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, watching human and Vexthani engineers work together to install new atmospheric processors. Supreme Admiral, can I tell you about something called the Marshall Plan? I am unfamiliar with this term. After one of humanity's worst wars, the winning nations had a choice. They could punish the losers, demand tribute, keep them weak and broken. Instead, they chose to help rebuild the defeated countries, to make them partners instead of enemies. Harrison pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of anger, a lot of mistrust, but in the end, those former enemies became some of humanity's closest allies. We learned that victory without reconciliation just plants the seeds for the next war, but victory with compassion, that can plant the seeds for lasting peace. Korthvex studied the historical data with fascination. Your species has experience with this process. Lots of experience, Dr. Wells added. Humans have been making enemies and then figuring out how to become friends for our entire history. We've gotten pretty good at it. But there's something else, Harrison continued, something we discovered during our conflict with your forces. Which is, diversity makes us stronger. Every Vexthani technique we encountered, every piece of technology we captured, every tactical innovation we observed, all of it made humanity better at defending itself. Harrison gestured to a nearby work area where human and Vexthani scientists were collaborating on new technologies. Your people understand energy manipulation in ways we never imagined. Our people understand adaptive engineering in ways you never considered. Together, we're developing innovations that neither species could achieve alone. A priority alert chimed through the station's communication system. Admiral Thekmore's voice echoed through the corridors. All senior staff to the command center. We have a situation. In the command center, Thekmore stood before a massive display showing the edge of known space. Red warning indicators pulsed along the galactic rim. Report, Harrison requested as the senior staff assembled. Long-range sensors have detected unknown vessels approaching from outside the galaxy, Thekmore explained. Configuration and technology signatures match no known species. Korthvex felt a familiar chill of military alertness. How many ships? Current count is over 2,000 vessels, with more appearing regularly. They appear to be scouting. Scouting for what? Dr. Wells asked. Unknown. But given their approach vector and formation patterns, I believe they are evaluating our defensive capabilities. Admiral Harrison studied the display with the same calm intensity he had shown during the battle for Earth. How long until they reach the outer colonies? At their current speed, approximately 6 weeks. The command center fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. An unknown force of 2,000 ships could threaten every established civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Harrison, Korthvek said formally, the remnants of the Vexthani military place themselves at your disposal. And the Galactic Council has already authorized joint defense operations, Thekmore added. Every spacefaring species will contribute ships and personnel. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we have 6 weeks to do something that's never been attempted in galactic history. Which is? Zathara asked. Unite every species in the galaxy into a single defense force, Harrison replied. Human adaptability, Vexthani military experience, council diplomatic resources, and whatever each species does best. He turned to address the assembled staff. 6 months ago, humanity faced the Vexthani Empire and proved that no adversary walks away from a fight with us unchanged. Now we're going to prove something even more important. What's that? Dr. Wells asked. Harrison smiled grimly. That no adversary walks away from a fight with a united galaxy. As alarms continued to sound and preparations began for humanity's first truly galactic war, children of a dozen different species continued playing together in Harmony Station's corridors, blissfully unaware that they represented the future their parents were fighting to protect. The age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an ancient threat was about to discover that some species don't just refuse to be conquered, they inspire others to refuse as well. The message that changed everything came not from Admiral Harrison or any human military commander, but from a 12-year-old girl named Emma Chen aboard a converted mining station orbiting Jupiter. Hello, Vexthani people, she said, her young voice carrying across communication channels to every alien ship in the solar system. My name is Emma, and I wanted to talk to you about something important. Admiral Thekmore, his flagship crippled and drifting, found himself listening despite his situation. Around him, his command crew worked frantically to restore basic systems while human boarding parties cut through the outer hull. I know you're scared, Emma continued. I know this isn't going the way you expected, but I want you to understand something about humans that maybe nobody told you. Captain Zathara, trapped on her own disabled vessel, felt something strange as she listened to the child's words. In all her centuries of conquest, no species had ever addressed her people with such innocence. We don't fight because we're mean or because we want to hurt people. We fight because we protect our families. And the thing is, once we start thinking of you as family too, we'll protect you just as hard as we protect ourselves. The girl's transmission was being broadcast from the mining station, but visual feeds showed she wasn't alone. Hundreds of human children were visible in the background, along with their families and teachers. They had turned an industrial facility into a refugee shelter, protecting their most vulnerable while still contributing to the war effort. My teacher, Miss Sarah, told us that you've conquered lots of other planets. She said you probably think conquering is the only way to survive in space, but that's not true. There are other ways. Admiral Thekmore felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service: doubt. Not about his tactical decisions or his fleet's capabilities, but about the fundamental assumptions that had driven the Vexthani Empire for millennia. See, humans learned a long time ago that fighting is sometimes necessary, but it's never the goal. The goal is to build something better, to make sure everyone has enough food and safe places to live and friends to care about them. Emma's voice was joined by other children, their words overlapping as they described their vision of the future, not just for humanity, but for all species they might encounter among the stars. We could be friends instead of enemies, a young boy added. We could teach you about Earth music and Earth food, and you could teach us about your worlds and your stories. We could explore space together, another child chimed in. We could find new planets where everyone could live peacefully. Thekmore found himself remembering his own childhood on the Vexthani homeworld, before the Empire's endless wars had consumed his life. He had once dreamed of exploring the stars not to conquer them, but simply to see what wonders they might contain. "Admiral," his tactical officer called softly, "the human boarding parties have reached the command deck." Techmore looked up to see figures in spacesuits cutting through the final blast door. He expected soldiers, weapons, demands for surrender. Instead, the humans who entered his bridge carried medical supplies and emergency rations. "Admiral Techmore," one of them said, removing her helmet to reveal an older human woman with kind eyes. "I'm Dr. Patricia Wells, Chief Medical Officer of the Earth Defense Force. Are you or any of your crew injured?" The question was so unexpected that Techmore couldn't immediately respond. You're offering medical assistance?" "Of course," Dr. Wells replied matter-of-factly. "The fighting is over. Now we take care of each other." Around the solar system, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of captured Vexthani vessels. Human boarding parties that had come prepared for combat instead found themselves providing humanitarian aid to their former enemies. "This makes no sense," Techmore protested. "We came here to conquer your world." "We tried to enslave your people," Dr. Wells smiled sadly. "Yes, you did. And we fought back, because that's what humans do when threatened. But now that you can't hurt us anymore, there's no point in hurting you." She gestured to her team, who were already treating injured Vexthani crew members. "We've learned a lot about your people over the past few days. We know you have families back home just like we do. We know you're soldiers following orders, not monsters." Captain Zethara, listening to her own ship's communication systems, heard similar conversations taking place throughout her fleet. Humans offering food, medical care, and shelter to the aliens they had just defeated. "But more than that," Dr. Wells continued, "we know you're intelligent, capable people who could accomplish amazing things if you weren't constantly fighting wars." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's major cities. "Do you see these lights? Each one represents millions of humans living together peacefully. We have hundreds of different cultures, languages, and beliefs, but we've learned to work together instead of destroying each other. It wasn't always this way," she admitted. "Humans fought terrible wars for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times, but we learned that cooperation achieves more than conquest." Admiral Techmore stared at the display, trying to comprehend a civilization that had chosen unity over domination. "Your species abandoned warfare?" "No," Dr. Wells replied. "We channeled it. Instead of fighting each other, we fight against problems, disease, hunger, ignorance, the hostile environment of space. We turned our aggression into a tool for building rather than destroying." The conversation was interrupted by another transmission from Admiral Harrison. His image appeared on screens throughout both fleets, but he looked different now, exhausted but hopeful. "Admiral Techmore, Captain Zethara, and all Vexithani personnel," he began. "The immediate hostilities are over. Your fleets have been disabled, but your crews are safe and will be treated according to our highest standards." Harrison paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Now we need to talk about what happens next. You came here expecting to add another conquered world to your empire. Instead, you've discovered that some species refuse to be conquered. But that doesn't mean this has to end in mutual destruction. Humanity would like to propose an alternative." The transmission shifted to show a massive space station under construction in Earth's orbit. Thousands of human and converted Vexithani ships were working together, their crews cooperating to build something unprecedented. "We're building a diplomatic station," Harrison explained. "A place where humans and Vexithani can meet as equals, to discuss trade, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. We know your empire is vast and ancient. We know you have knowledge and technologies that could benefit humanity immensely. But we also know that humans have perspectives and innovations that could benefit you." Admiral Techmore found himself leaning forward, captivated despite himself. "The question is, are you willing to try something that no one in galactic history has attempted? Are you willing to explore what might be possible if two species chose cooperation over conquest?" For the first time in centuries, Admiral Techmore considered the possibility that there might be alternatives to the endless cycle of war that had defined Vexthani civilization. The humans had proven they could fight. Now they were offering to prove they could build.